First, I want to start and let you all know I also had the great pleasure of working with Canary. I was with the South Florida Water Management District for 36 years, and Nat Reed was a governing board member for a great period of time during the 1980s and was extremely instrumental in helping us move forward with a lot of on-the-ground research on agriculture north of Lake Okeechobee. So, as others have said, I also feel his presence here today. So that kind of puts maybe the third bullseye on me, since I'm from agriculture. I'm also a city council member in Okeechobee, and I worked for the Water Management District for 36 years. You know, the last city council meeting I was at, I sit right next to the mayor. And we all generally get there at least 30 minutes ahead of time, so we can kind of say hi to everyone and talk to each other a little bit. And as I take my seat, the mayor kind of leans over toward me and he says, "You know, I got a call from this guy today." And he was mad. He was adamant. And he told me, he said, "When are you going to shut those gates to Lake Okeechobee and stop those discharges?" And I'm like, "Really?" And yeah, and the mayor said, "I just gave him your phone number." So, anyways, you know, the other thing is, after I left the Water Management District and I started working at the Florida Farm Bureau, I do have to attend a lot of Water Management District Governing Board meetings, and I ran into one of my colleagues on the way to the meeting. I was walking up to the building, and he says, "Gary, aren't you glad that you don't have to deal with all of these issues anymore?" And I looked at him and I said, I kind of laughed, and I said, "You really have to be kidding. I mean, you multiply those issues that you have by 10, and you have agriculture." I mean, we got transportation issues, we got labor issues, we got trade issues, we got regulation, we got environment, we got food safety issues. I'm not going to talk about any of those today. But those are things that really kind of confront us in the agricultural community. What I would like to do today is kind of give you a perspective. I know we talked about, well, Gary's going to talk about agriculture in Martin County, and I am going to mention agriculture in Martin County, but when you talk about agriculture anywhere in the state of Florida, it's kind of, we're kind of all talking about agriculture everywhere. And you know, the important thing is here, and I think rather than bullseye, I think we have an opportunity. We have a bridge here. There's common ground, because agriculture, and especially the Florida Farm Bureau, supports Everglades restoration, believe it or not, and we support agricultural sustainability. I have heard both of those things today. I have heard that agricultural sustainability is important if done right. So what I'd like to kind of talk about is how the difficulties and the challenges of how agriculture is going to be able to remain sustainable within the next 30, 40, 50 years to 2070. I mean, the maps that were brought up here in the beginning of this conference kind of showed the challenges of development kind of moving in on agricultural land. Well, the challenges that agriculture is going to have and future farmers will have is adapting to all of these changes. Changes in farming acreages, changes in the economy, changes in population, climate, technology, eating habits. All of these things are going to be difficult to maintain farming operations, especially when we look at, from a national standpoint, during a 5-year period in 2014, we lost around 90,000 farms. And we're losing almost close to 1 million acres of farmland across the United States every year. And roughly 20% of our food supply is being imported. So I know we all love to eat. However, it's interesting because when I started at the Farm Bureau, I started learning a lot about, Americans. Americans love to eat, but they don't really want to have anything to do with farming. They want to make sure, you go into the grocery store and there's food supply for them. So that's a challenge in and of itself in maintaining and convincing our farmers to continue farming and not give up that land to development. Companies that are in Florida that are growing perishable products are really having a difficult time in terms of trade issues, because as you all read the latest trade deal that was done, it really does not help the farmers here in Florida. Many of those folks are actually moving their operations to, for instance, Mexico, because the labor is cheaper, there's no regulations, and it's easier to get their products out and make money. Americans want a safe food supply. They also want it grown environmentally sound ways, but yet when we go to the grocery store, many of us are really not very selective on where we buy, how we buy our food and where it comes from. So in the state of Florida, we have approximately 48,000 farms right now. That's kind of up a little bit, but over that period that you see, we've also lost a 1 million acres of farmland. The state of Florida is roughly 35 million acres in size. Now think about that. Although there's been a slight uptick, we've lost approximately 1 million acres of farmland. So agriculture represents roughly 1/3 of the state of Florida, of that 35 million acres. 3.4 million acres of that land, of the state land, is owned by the state of Florida. 4.8 million acres is owned by the federal government, and roughly 17 million acres is in urban areas, urban landscapes. So the challenge is how do we maintain our agricultural sustainability with an increasing desire to develop those urban landscapes, and that desire, as you've heard today, to actually move outward rather than maintain things inward. So Martin County, I actually was able to pull some of this information, and I think a lot of it thanks to Yvette. Yvette has, and I think there's a young lady back there, how can I get involved? There is an Agricultural and Natural Resource Committee in Martin County, and they meet once a month. Very, very informative meeting. Right now, and I did, and thanks to Nikki back there, I kind of started doing the numbers, and it does work out. There's roughly 75,000 acres of conservation land. There's 75,000 acres of urban, and 183,000 acres of agriculture in Martin County right now. So roughly, what, 50% almost of Martin County is still in ag. 66% in pasture land, which is cow-calf operation, which is your lowest intensity. Very surprised to see 12% of that in sugarcane. You have cropland mixed in there, and citrus. Those are your 4 top. Citrus has been on the decline. If you go back to 2005, the state of Florida produced roughly 350 million boxes of citrus a year. We're kind of down to right around 70, which is a slight uptake from last year. I think we were maybe at 65 or 50. The agricultural food sector, the gross domestic product across the United States is $750 billion. All the commodities in Florida are $8.5 billion. And if you take a look at Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River County, the agricultural sector brings in roughly about $500 million. If you add in Osceola, Lee, and Hendry counties, that brings, for this South Florida area, almost 50% of that $8.5 billion comes from the South Florida agricultural industry. So, what do we have? We've all talked about the water resources, the growth, the product demand. Right now, there's, some people say 800, some people say 1,000, some say 1,100 folks moving into Florida every day. And that continues to grow. In South Florida, we have 8.1 million people. You look back when the Central and Southern Florida flood control system was completed, maybe 2 million. So the growth is a lot. We're all, as we've mentioned, we're all competing for water resources, recreation, public consumption, and irrigation, and our food supply. The challenge for agriculture is to provide enough food to keep up with the growth while minimizing the environmental impacts, such as water and natural resources. I just kind of threw this one up. This was just kind of a bunch of numbers that I had not realized that the South Florida area, produces enough sugar to supply 65 million people. Sweet corn, 1 billion people for 2 months. And, the list goes on. Fresh green beans, 350 million servings. 200 million pounds of corn silage. Celery, many people don't realize we grow celery, we grow radishes, 36 million pounds of radishes. So these are the things that we actually produce agriculture in South Florida. So climate changes in agriculture, of course, we have CO2 levels. There's some experiments that suggest that, higher CO2 levels can maybe give us higher crop yields. Don't know about that, but, other factors, we got changing temperatures, which can negatively affect crop yields, can negatively affect cattle operations, can negatively affect the way we have to deal with our mechanization and the way we have to deal with our labor. The higher temperatures, the CO2 levels also create pest and weed problems that are also become challenges for agriculture. One of the things that we see happening with the climate changes in agriculture in the state of Florida is we're growing different things. Of course, the oranges, interestingly enough, if you look back several decades, we had oranges in Central Florida that were devastated by freezes that we had. Now we have the greening that University of Florida is working on, so that we can try to make that citrus industry a viable industry again. But what we're seeing is during the winter time, we're not experiencing those extreme cold climates. So you see the oranges are migrating farther north again. And believe it or not, there are places in Georgia that are growing oranges. We also have peaches down here in that picture on the bottom right are hops that were grown. And one of the things that is very interesting, I just attended the water forum last week, and oh, we're getting close to that, aren't we? I need to be able to talk faster. One of the things, I attended the water forum last week, and you know, the hops that are grown, there's a brewery in Tampa that's actually taking wastewater and converting that into potable water and then making beer with it. So those are some of the things to come. It was good. Diane, tell me, it was not bad. You know, there was a light beer and a dark beer, and they had it labeled 1 and 2. So, I need to really finish this up. So, anyways, we got precision agriculture. We have technologies that we're hoping gonna improve the way agriculture does business, because we also feed the world, and there's going to be projected 9.5 billion people in this world in 2050. We got site-specific crop management, we got sensors, we have drones. 4 R's, we are coming out, we are going to be certifying fertilizer applicators with the 4 R's: right source, right rate, right time, and right place. We, as agriculture, have to do a better job so that we can protect the environment and remain sustainable. University of Florida, they do, we depend on University of Florida for the research, for the information they provide us to help us do farm in better ways. I got that slide down at the very bottom left. That's, you know, we're doing dispersed water management. We're holding more water back on the landscape, and I think there's more of that that's going to come. On the far right, we have different bed configurations that are being designed that are more efficient with our use of water, irrigation water, and our use of fertilizers. If you look at the top left, we have the CARES program. We like to recognize those farmers that the Florida Department of Agriculture has verified that they have implemented BMPs and they are improving nutrient runoff. This is one way that we can recognize them within their peers. And if you drive around and you see one of those signs, that means you have an agricultural operation that is implementing BMPs 100%. Technology, again, we've talked about that. We have to mechanize more. Our labor is becoming more and more of an issue, and with immigration issues going on right now, we have to do a better job in finding ways to harvest, in work our crops with mechanization rather than labor. One of the other things, and this is kind of a little bit off, we have an industry from Norway that's actually coming down to Homestead, Atlantic Sapphire, and they're gonna grow salmon down there under closed conditions. Eating habits, of course, we've all, how many did the veggie sandwich? You know, I mean, there's a lot of vegetarians out there, so farmers are having to adapt. So, you know, we're growing more vegetables now versus maybe less beef. People are eating more chicken, they're eating more seafood. Again, I think that's my closing. And what I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there's one important thing that I think we all need to take into consideration. And I'm stealing this from Temperance Morgan, who mentioned this African proverb at her talk. She's the director of the Nature Conservancy. And you know, as I said in the beginning of this presentation, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to all work together on the environmental issues. And the African proverb is, if we go alone, we go fast. But if we go together, working together, we go far.
I do want to do Q&A. We're a little bit over our schedule, so here's what I propose. We're going to skip the 15-minute break. When we go and switch to the next session, if you need to stretch your legs, grab something to drink, please do that. We're going to roll straight into our panel session after this, so that we're able to get our full panel session in and still conclude at 4:15. So with that, I'm going to go into Q&A. Maggie, always first.
A long time ago on one of John DeGrove's state committees, when Wayne Nixon was lieutenant governor, he told us that if you don't let me sell my land for development, I can't afford to keep on going farming. And traditionally in Florida, you know, urbanization got a little further, you sold it for development, then you go buy another piece and go on farming. How do we break out of that unsustainable pattern?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And I don't know if this is going to be the answer to it, but you know, the Nature Conservancy, we've been working with the Nature Conservancy on conservation programs. There's the Florida Lands Trust that, you know, where we can keep agriculture on the land in perpetuity, because many families really want to stay there, and they are good stewards of the land. But unless we have those programs, the regulation pressures, the development pressures, the environmental pressures, I think are going to move the next generation out, because many of the younger kids look at it and say, you know what, I just don't want to work that hard. You know, and really, I think only 2% of the population, and maybe even less than that in the state of Florida, are farmers anymore. So that's one of our challenges, because you know, we do want to keep some of that green space on the landscape. Otherwise, you're right, we're going to be concrete all over. I don't know if that answered you.
No, not an answer.
You know, I don't know if I can add to that, but working one time in a project to do precisely that, to address the pressure of development during the boom where every farmer wanted to sell to a major national home builder. You know, someone said in the room, you know, we're all very concerned about being oil dependent from other nations. Imagine being food dependent. You know, we will be able to figure out how to walk to the store, but if we have nothing in the store to eat, then what? I think it has a lot to do with policy. I think there are not just states, but nations that have shown us that the land is sacred. But at the same time, they have policies that financially, every time development happens, something goes back to the land to support it. So it's a subsidy that is tied to development, not to the federal government. My family, part of it comes from Europe. My grandmother was from France. She had a little farm. The farm cannot be subdivided amongst the heirs. It can only be inherited by the oldest son, and he has to continue farming the land or give it to the next brother, and it just cannot be subdivided, period. And her farm looks exactly the same from when she was 5, when I visited a couple of years ago. So it is policy. I think that our policies are not strong enough. And I also think that our mechanisms to understandably protect and support the farm are also not totally there yet.
Maggie, if I may, just one more comment. The Florida Farm Bureau has what they call a Young Farmers and Ranchers program. When I came onto the Farm Bureau 4 years ago, there were probably 80 young people in that program. There are, and this is an encouraging point from my perspective, there are 350 statewide young farmers and ranchers in the Farm Bureau program now, which to me is a positive sign that there are some young people out there that want to continue providing food and fiber for our state and our country and the world.
All right, last question for this panel.
Good afternoon. My name is Zelmira Gamey. I'm a member of the Government Affairs Committee for the Realtors Association of Martin County. Stacy Hetherington and I have been here for the session today. I would like to get cards from each of the panel members and present them to the Government Affairs Committee and then to the Realtors Association of Martin County, so that we can have you to do a forum in our county for homeowners, developers, planners, citizens of our community, all of our governmental officials. I would appreciate getting a card from you before the end of the session, and we would like to have that done as soon as possible. It has been an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to ask a question that you want to?
Okay, thanks. I'm honored to think along the same lines as Maggie. I had a very similar question, but let me get a little bit more specific, Gary. Laura Reynolds, and I've spent probably about 15 years fighting development in Dade County. And I can tell you that at least 10 times I've sat with the Farm Bureau and said, imagine if we went arm in arm and protected this farmland. We have a comp plan that identifies the Redland Protection Area, for example. Yet I can never get a farmer to come with me and say, let's not do this. And so the question I have for you is, have you ever thought about lobbying for density and transit and infill development as a Farm Bureau?
I don't know if I'm the right one from the Farm Bureau to answer that question. We have 2 gentlemen up in Tallahassee, that Anna Bassford and Lance Pierce, who do legislative lobbying. I can tell you our goal is to keep as much farmland as possible. And this is all kind of off your question, but I got an email today that the South Dade County Commission want to look at requiring fencing of all farm and vacant land down in the Redland area, which is going to cost farmers thousands and thousands of dollars, and they want to come up with an ordinance to that. So those are kind of things that we struggle with constantly, and even with smaller farms that are existing in larger counties, that in order for them to survive, they're trying to do agritourism, and they want to do education as well as as well as farm. And, you know, and it's just sometimes a struggle with local governments to convince them not to create ordinances that are going to put undue challenges on them. And I'm struggling with Lee County right now on that.
Well, let's think out of the box. I'd like to see the Farm Bureau try to look at, hey, if we actually lobby for density in transit, we would have more green space to farm on, period. Across the state.
Let's talk about that.
I would love that. Be a great conversation. On that note, I want to thank all of our panelists.